Welcome, adventurers. I'm GM Goblin, and today we're coming off of my last video when I went over briefly the Kineticist in Pathfinder 1E, and today I'm going to show you a simple build for a Kineticist using the Air Elemental, and why I picked what I picked, and maybe a few options for you if you want to try your own in a game. So this is my airbender. And as you can see, I picked Gathling as the race. Now, it's not the only race you can pick, but it's the one I chose, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. Let me go over a couple other races that are pretty good, and we will go why I believe Gathling is really the best one for the Kineticist in Pathfinder. Other possible races we're looking at are going to be the human. Good, true, everyone knows it. 2 racial bonus to any ability score. You can get the extra feat. If you really want to have a bonus in both of your main stats, your Constitution and Dex, then I recommend going with dual talent. It's rid of the feat if you can live with that. Just depends on how feat heavy and what you kind of want to do with your build. Human's a pretty good pick because it has got, as a favorite class option, the Kineticist, giving you a extra wild talent feat once every 6 levels. Wild talent feats, ironically come on at level 6, give you the ability to get an extra infusion or wild talent. It just allows you to round your character out for anything you're missing. So it's pretty good, and we'll use it, or I used it, later on in my levels. Another race that's pretty good is going to be the Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin's good because 2 dexterity and 2 con. Kineticists require con. You're going to get extra damage from it. You're going to get your burn, which is your main mechanic. It's going to increase how much burn you can take in a day, as well as how many times you can burn yourself. Dexterity, since we're going to be doing a ranged build, is going to be all about just your attack. Everything else you can swap out, whatever you need, whatever fits you. Another good one is going to be a merfolk. It's going to be the exact same reason, Dex Con. Only problem is merfolk has the abysmal 5-foot movement because you're a merfolk. So you don't have legs, swim speed, so if you're in a water campaign, it may be the best one for you, really. You can get an option to give you a 20-foot movement speed, so it's not too bad. I pick Gathling. Specifically, I pick an alternate racial trait for the Gathling. Gathling is they get 2 dexterity and charisma, and then a -2 to con. Reason I picked the alternate trait is because I want Treeborn. Treeborn is going to give us our Constitution back. Takes away the -2, but our fly speed goes to 30 instead of 40, and our movement from 30 to 20. It's perfectly fine. We'll take care of that later. Not a big deal. But the best thing about a Gathling is this right here. Increased amount of burn cost reduction when using a Kineticist gather power ability once every 6 levels. Basically, 12 levels in, you'll have double the ability to mitigate burn as anyone else. So that's why I think Gathling is just the best. And then everything else you can switch around however you need to. But on a Kineticist, as I've mentioned burn a couple times now, burn is going to be your ability where you take non-lethal damage in place of spell slots to activate certain utility abilities as well as increase your damage. And you can only accept so much burn per level, and of course, this goes up from 1 at first to rises at 2 at 6, and it increases as you level up. And then, of course, your maximum amount of burn you're allowed to take is your Constitution modifier plus 3. And by the time you're done, this character will have more con than anyone else in your party because I think 15 and I had 30s. So, but you've got burn for one of your main focuses, gather power. Gather power allows you to use your action as mitigate part of that burn from your blast. This increases depending on how long you decide to gather your power. And It's supposed to be very visible, very loud, annoying. I kind of describe it as like a grinding, but generally it starts at 1 point, and that's going to carry you through most of your levels. Kathleen, of course, will increase this at level 6, but you can do that for a move action. Full round actions 2, and then if you decide to do it for a round and a move, it does 3. You're really only ever going to do that is if you're getting the drop on someone and you have a lot of time to prepare. But gather power, you will do every single round. It'll be 5-foot step, gather power, blast. Since your blast is going to be a action. Your elemental focus is going to be picking your element. When you pick element, and this is on a Foundry character sheet, if you haven't seen any of my videos before, and you choose your primary element to focus on. We're going to pick air because we're making an airbender, and you get a few things. You get your Kineticist for your first utility at level 1, and you gain the skills, like I mentioned in the last video, for being an Kineticist. So your basic Kinesis is going to be something 1 takes no burn originally. You get it at level 1. You use this ability, and you gain a +2 bonus for hot conditions, severe breath weapons, and cloud vapors, gaseous. All the things that can kill you low levels, like that when it comes to poison effects, are going to be something that this protects against. You can even put this on other individuals. Breath weapon is fantastic even later on. Another thing that you're going to get with this is your first simple blast. Whichever element you pick. Your first kinetic blast, we're going to go with the electric blast. Electric blast is energy. Most of your elements have 2 types, physical and energy. Energy is going to deal slightly less damage, but it's to touch attack, or to touch AC, which, other than goblins, isn't bad, and it scales perfectly as you go on. It does have spell resistance that you have to get by, but at low levels, you will not run into this, so it's not going to be a problem. When it comes to damage between the 2 of them, looking at for energy, 1d6 points of damage per 2 levels after 1. So 1, 3. Every odd level, you get an additional dice. So when you're using your energy, you get 1d6, and then you get half of your constitution modifier. It goes up with your level. Physical gets 1d6 plus 1, and it gets the entirety of your constitution modifier, and it increases, like I said, 1d6 plus 1 for every additional 2 levels. One of the things you get at level 1 is going to be an infusion. An infusion, they come in 2 flavors. Infusions come in either a form or a substance. You can only have 1 form or 1 substance on any blast, and you can change it round to round. So if you pick a million of these to cover a whole bunch of different possibilities, it's great. I recommend when you're doing air to always go with extend range first. A blast starts with a range of 30 feet, and you want this to be able to use your move action and increase it, and you increase your kinetic blast to 120 feet. So it's great, first level. It means you can hit anything you can see. You're right up there with range classes, basically. To be your level 1. As you advance to level 2, you get elemental defense and the ability to start taking, and your first utility. Your elemental defense, depending on which element, since ours is air, is just the defensive ability which is listed with the element. In our case, the enveloping winds. Enveloping winds give you a 20% mischance ranged attacks against you. Once again, this is on you, and you can dismiss and restore this effect as an immediate action. So there's no time limit on this. There's no burn cost initially. And you get a 20% mischance. Mischance goes up by 5% every 5 levels, so at 5, 10, 15, and 20. And you can also take a point of burn to increase it by 5 if you want to. So it's one of those things, and you'll see this a lot, where you can take burn to increase the power of whatever utility you have. And increase it above 75%, but it's a great thing to have. If you're going to be ranged, you might have to deal with a lot of ranged attacks anyway. And then your utilities are just going to be effects that apply to your character. And some of them can be used like a spell, almost. Some of them are buffs. In my case, and my recommendation, is to always take this one. 0 burn. When you use an air blast, we're always going to be using air blast, air wild talent, whatever. It doubles the blast's effective range. That is super for us. 30 turns to 60. That also means if we want to at level 2, we can spend a move action, and 240 foot is our range. It's great. For touch, electrical damage, it's great. As we go up to level 3, you're going to get another infusion, like I said, every odd level for the most part, and then you're going to get elemental overflow. Elemental overflow, basically, when you take burn, you're going to get total number of points, depending on how much burn that you have, to per every 3 levels, I should say, you get +1. So at level 6, it's +2, and so on and so forth. And it's just a increase straight at for your attacks. And you get double that for the damage rolls of your blast. And it has some visual effects that it mentions where it appears on you as like lightning across your skin or something like that. So it's fairly thematical and kind of cool for your character too. And then of course you can suppress this. So once you've accepted burn for the day, since that non-lethal damage doesn't go away until after you take a nap, then you can suppress that so you don't look like you're walking around and stick out. Another thing is we level up with elemental overflow. Starting at level 6, once we've taken 3 points of burn, you get to add a +2 to any 2 of your 3 physical scores. So you're going to do Dex and Con. And you also ignore critical hits at a 5% chance times the current burn you have. It's great later on because when you have 7 points of burn, that's more than a third of a chance to not have to worry about having sneak or crit damage. And then, of course, at 11, once you get to 5, you get a +4 increase and then a +2 to the other 2. And then at 7, it's 6, 4, and 2 to whichever skill or whichever stats that you want. It's a way that they have put into the character to help increase his damage and attack as he levels up, since you're not using a weapon like a lot of your other ranged characters. Now, you get another utility wild talent at 4, and I'll go over a lot of my wild talents and why I picked them here in just a minute. Another infusion at 5, you get Metakinesis, Empower, and Infusion Specialization. So, Infusion Specialization is something that, like our abilities, takes away part of the burn so that we can dish out more damage. It starts off with any time you use a blast. If you have an infusion, so that range increase, like I had mentioned at the start for extended range, that is going to be able to eat that, and you still have your move action if you want. And it's every time you use a blast. Secondly, it's going to go up additionally at 8, 11, 14, 17, 20. So as you get on, you can add more and more expensive things to your blasts to make them more impressive and functional. Your Metakinesis, like I mentioned, it has Empower. Empower works the exact same way as your spell does. It's going to increase the dice, the numerical effects of your spell. So just like you would for your caster, if you've ever done it, Magus, it does the exact same thing at 1 point of burn. So by now, you're going to be using, at level 5, your movement action, take care of that 1 point of burn for that Empower. And then, of course, you want to take a little bit of burn as we go so that your overflow starts to jack up. So we want to take that damage. And like most other things, Metakinesis increases with our levels. At level 9, you get Maximize. Exact same thing. It's going to maximize the damage dice. It's 2 points of burn, and it's good, solid. The best one, really, is going to be your 13th level one, which is Quicken. Quicken is going to allow you to do another blast. You take 3 points of burn somewhere in there, or you're going to write that off with your move action to be able to use 2 blasts now. You can do that again, higher levels, where you get the ability to blast twice with it, and you can still use Quicken. It's just increasing. Since we don't get extra iterative attacks, this Metakinesis is just allowing us to increase and multiply how many attacks we get per turn. Swift is also, or Quicken is also great because it allows you to do some interesting effects. with your action and still get a decent blast off. So level 5, level 6, like I said earlier, your elemental overflow goes up. You get another utility spell, and then you get something called an internal buffer. Internal buffer, you take off some of your burn. This is going to be one of those effects that is a little bit different. So you can accept 1 point of burn from your buffer, and it will go up to 2 points at level 11 where you can do this, but this is only for a day. So this is like just having an extra bit of burn in your back pocket that you can take out. And then 3 points at level 16. The trick is with this is it doesn't renew or replenish itself on its own. It will start off, though I've let people start off with just an internal buffer with 1. Starts off, and you do not get this replenished every day. So if you have 1 burn left at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, fill this up, take your points of burn, take your temporary damage, and then go to sleep. And then your burn resets, and you have your internal buffer fixed. Your next big thing is going to be expanded element. Expanded element, for a lot of people, would be when we would get to add a different element. This build, I'm only going to be using an airbender. So you can take an additional element, or you can just use the exact same one. You're keeping your specialization. Your additional element, when you take, unless otherwise noted, a infusion, or you take a utility that is specific for that element, then it's considered 4 levels lower. So it's a little bit harder to get in. That's why your primary element is so important. But when we do this, we get access to composite blasts, which you automatically get all the ones you apply for, or you are able to use if you pick a different element, or in our case, just sticking with air. And since we're going to pick air, we get the other blast. So we're going to get the standard air blast that we didn't pick up at level 1. If you picked a new element, you'd get a pick out of one of those 2 blasts. But you get that, and we get composite blasts. It is going to be the thunderstorm blast. It is all air, composite blast. It does require a burn of 2. It is air and air for your elements, primary and expanded elements. It is a physical blast, so it does touch normal AC, or it hits normal AC. It is half bludgeoning and half electric whenever you do it. Also, as we went over before, it doesn't do the damage that your first blast does. It is increased. Composite blasts double. So if you're using a composite energy blast, it is now 2d6 per 2 levels past the first one, so 1, 3. So it is 2d6 plus still half of your kineticists, or your constitution. And then, of course, the physical blast, which we're just taking, is going to be 2d6 plus 2 plus your constitution. Especially we can still add all the other things to it. The composite blast is where you start having to really look at what you're doing and be willing to accept a burn and allocate what you're allowing to burn or what you're using your abilities to write off the burn with. But as an expanded element for level 7, since we're going to take the same element, we get another ability, wild talent. In our case, level 8, you're going to see the same thing. It's still going to be another infusion, or another wild talent, and then you get one of the best things, something else to mitigate burn. Fusion specialization. This allows us to remove burn from every blast. So whenever we use a blast, if it has an infusion of any kind on it, start off being able to mitigate 1 burn. So basically, if your infusion costs 1, you get it for free from now on. And of course, like all the other things, this increases with your level, 8, 11, 14, 17, 20. And so it allows you to add all those things that you picked up for your infusions to your blasts and increase their effectiveness. Elemental overflow goes up again at level 3. Your saves are pretty good at fort and reflex. They're going to be your strong ones anyway. You will have to find ways to mitigate your wisdom, because you don't want to get controlled by someone and nuke your party, because you can do it. You get 9, another infusion. Maximize Metakinesis, like I said. 10, same thing. 11, your internal buffer goes up. Your infusion specialization. And here's a new ability, Supercharge. Supercharge is going to be just added to Gather Power. So when you use Gather Power as a move action, though, a Kineticist can reduce 2 points now of burn instead of 1. This is at 11, and the reason I say use the Gathlane is because at 11 we get Supercharge. At 12, we're not doing 2 like everyone else for our move action. We're now doing 4. So when you get Supercharge, you go from 2 to 3. And now you're doing 4 at level 12, where you hit your next overflow, your wild talent, and we just keep going up. Another infusion, Metakinesis, specializations, they increase with their levels, your internal buffer, your infusion, your final Metakinesis, all the way through your levels until your final abilities, which you get your final infusion at 20, or final infusion specialization at 20, utility, and then omnikinesis. In kinesis for level 20, by accepting 1 point of burn, you can use any blast wild talent don't know. By accepting burn as a standard action, you can change any of your wild talents to any other wild talents of the same category. And of course, at level 15, forgot to mention, you're going to get another expanded element. You can select the same as you did at 7, but it doesn't. I would just pick a different one. It just makes you more rounded and gives you more options. For what I recommend, after you have all of your abilities, I recommend, as stated, taking for level 1, your extended range. Pushing is another one. It's not bad, but there's not a whole lot of options that I really liked. And at low level, this could come in handy every once in a while. It allows you to make a ranged bull rush. And so you can push someone back 5 feet. I think I've used this once. Your Focus Blast is another one of those that there wasn't a whole lot of options that I could pick at the time with just using air. And so it does give you an increased 1 to your attack. I would not use the secondary part, which allows you to invest more burn per additional 1, because it doesn't scale well enough. If you have the free burn and you want to use this and nothing else is applicable for a form, then I would just go ahead and use this, or just stick with your ranged. When it comes to going on at level 7, since you see these are level 3, these are level 2. In Infusion, you only gain on odd levels. You have to be double whatever this level is, kind of like with your spells, to be able to take it. So 1, 3, I had to take a 1 level for each one of those. Level 5, I had to take a level 2 or a level 1. And then at level 7, I get to take probably one of the best ones there is, period, which is a great reason to pick air, as well as the all-day flight utility. Magnetic Infusion. Magnetic Infusion, you have to be using something with electrical. So you're going to be using Thunderstorm, or you'll use Electric, and they have a few others on there. For us, Plasma can do it, Metal can do it, but for us, we would have to be using Electrical or Thunderstorm unless we went with a different build. It gives you, when you hit a target, a +4 for your friends that are using metal weapons, +4 until the end of your next turn to their attack, and they take a -4 to the reflex. So you have given your melee extra attack, you have decreased the reflex save for the target for your controller or mage friend. It's great. Chain is another one. Kind of cool. It is at level 5 to be 11-4. Takes 3 burn, but it basically is like Chain Lightning for us. It decreases by 1d6 from our electrical every time you bounce off someone, but by using your abilities, you can hit someone hundreds of feet away and start running through the mobs. So it's pretty good for weak mobs and clearing out hordes. That was out of order. And Snake Infusion, which is level 3, is what you would take at level 9. You can also take this if you wanted before, but I think you ought to wait, and Magnetism's just better. For 2 burn, which you have multiple ways to mitigate by now, allow you to basically ignore cover. So no more than 120 feet long, but you trace a path for your blast to hit a target. So it takes away the ability for you to miss so easily. It's great. I used it multiple times whenever I was shooting around multiple targets or hitting the guy that thought he had cover on me. Wall Infusion I didn't think was going to be pretty good. It comes out to be pretty decent if you have a lot of low-level mobs. It's got a pretty good length to it at 120 feet, and you're going to want to use an energy blast with it. It is 1/4 when you first initially lay it for physical blast. It is half for an energy blast, and you're going to lay the wall if you lay it on them. Also, swing throw, none. Anytime a creature crosses the wall, it takes half normal damage from your blast, or it takes full if it's energy. Buff it up, lay it down with your lightning, and you can create a wall. We used it, like some of the other damaging walls like fire and stuff, that if they're in it for their turn, then you're going to deal damage to them. So I would lay it around my players and through the enemies, so they started taking damage, and then they would either be pinned by the players and they'd take the damage every turn, or they would have to move through it to get out of it again. And so they would take damage no matter what. So it's a great way, free damage every single round, and you can do it on multiple targets. I used it a lot in the game we were in. That is going to take you up into level 11. And then for utilities for this character, outside of your basic air kinesis and your air's reach that I've already told you about, we're going to take air cushion at 1, 2, 4. It goes by the same rules, but we're going to take this for what comes next. Wings of Air. Air cushion is going to be featherfall, so for some reason we can't fly, we can't do anything. This gets dispelled after we get it. Our wings get clipped something. We have featherfall on all the time, so it's a great way to keep you from plummeting to your death if you have a GM that likes to do that to you. Wings of Air, prerequisite, air cushion or air's leap. Air's leap just allows you to jump. It adds an increase to your acrobatics. But this allows you as the fly spell. So 60-foot flight from now on, no burn. It's forever. It's great. At level 7, from my group, and you'll see a lot of people that'll do this, is they will take Elemental Whispers. And you could take this in place of one of the other ones. But what I did is at level 7, I took this, and then I took the extra wild talent. And what it allowed me to do is get the original Elemental Whispers, which is like a familiar. Only difference is it's an empathic link to an element that is basically inside you. You gain alertness and a special ability for the familiar. It's not really that great, but it allows you to use part of your turn to summon the elemental and then allow them to move, and they can scout for you. You can do a lot of tricks with them. Ether is better with this than most of the others, in my opinion. But with Elemental Whispers Greater, the reason I took it was because it's just like having a improved familiar. You're going to be limited to your element, either a small element or a wisp, depending on whichever one you want. And it can scout for you, it can move for you. I used mine because it's going to have a UMD on it. I used it to use wands to pick up party members and stuff. And I used it for Sage on the familiar. So I had it turned into a Sage familiar because it was an odd party and we had no skills. We started off at a higher level, but I think that's true. We had Sage ability so that she could use knowledge checks and everything for us. And then, of course, I had her UMD up because my UMD was up, and she could use wands for us fairly reliably. Another thing that I did for her, additional traits, so that I could use Pragmatic Activator and Dangerously Curious, both of which are focused for UMD. Since she's Sage, she's going to have a higher intelligence. Now, I didn't see anything that said I couldn't use additional traits, so that's the reason that I use that. And then, of course, I use Combat Advice. Combat Advice allows her, if she can see me and she can see my target, she gives me advice, and I gain a +2 competence to my attack roll. So I know it's going to get targeted by the GM. It's going to be an air elemental. It's flat, fast. She can move, and she can hide when she needs to. But this allows her to give me a competence bonus and just improves my hit ratio. If you're using an ether, which I might make a build on, especially because my wife likes it, then it's easier. They can go invisible. see. Another okay one is Windsight. Lets you see through fog. We used a gimmick for hiding a ranged slayer in my character for this, so we were constantly shooting from inside and from behind a wall of fog. So it also allows you to see to a greater effect when there is, wind speed. You can see around corners and stuff. It's one of those things that requires your GM to assist you more than others, but it can come in handy. One of my favorite ones is this, Spark of Life. Spark of Life is level 5. It allows you to summon an elemental. As you see, it has 0 burn to start off with, because you can use your movement action to control the elemental. So you summon. It starts off as Summon Monster 4, quickly increases to higher, ends at Summon Monster 8 when you hit level 18. But it allows you to constantly pull out this elemental to do things with, or you take 1 point of burn, like it says, and you can pour sentience into it, and it works just like a normal summons. It can work on its own, and you can get back. You can still use a blast with this and use your movement action to do things. I cleared an entire dungeon worth of traps with that trick right there. Ride the Blast is a great way to get yourself out of situations and to allow you to teleport. You've got lots of range with air. You've got your blasts. So you get to do this, use your blast, and you end up wherever your blast is. So I would use this to get myself out of a situation and then quicken to blast the target once I had left. And like I said, utilities are very much like spells. Suffocate is one you can get by level 13, which allows you to require saving throws, or you literally will suffocate the individual. And burning makes it more effective. Burning yourself makes it more effective. Synaptics Infusion is an earlier one. It's okay, but I never got a chance to use it. It uses electrical. I'd use something else. And it causes the opponent to be staggered for 1 round. Feats doing ranged. We had a Feat tax house rule, so elephant in the room. And so I didn't have to worry about point blank shot, but of course you're going to want point blank shot. It is prerequisite to precise shot, which you will definitely need because you are a ranged combatant that is going to constantly be shooting into melee. You can use weapon focus and some of the other abilities. Now, unfortunately, you can't use things like Vital Strike. It specifically mentions that whenever you look at your ability, but certain weapon type feats like weapon focus work. And so I recommend getting it an extra attack. Since you only have usually 1 attack a turn, it's going to pay in spades for it, even if you're going to be taxed for feats. Improved initiative is good. You want to go first. You want to hit things first. You want to be able to lay down walls. Not necessary. Improved critical is one of those things. Maybe you don't need it. But with all those dice, having 2 times crit, going from 5 to 10% for your crit, it's nothing to sneeze at. Mobile gathering, if you're doing air, it's just going to be necessary for you to eventually have it. You can get it starting at level 7, and it allows you to move your base, half your base speed, as well as gather power. So instead of a 5-foot movement action, your fly speed is 60 now because of Wings of Air, but your base speed is 30. So you can move 15 feet while gathering power, while flying, and still perform the rest of your actions. So it's great. Wild Talent, as previously stated, it's going to give you a talent that is at least 2 levels lower than your highest level that you can currently use, and you select an infusion or non-infusion, Wild Talent, but not a blast or defensive talent. And you have to expend if you have to expend elemental class feature, you can select a Wild Talent from any of your elements that's at least 2 levels lower from the highest level Wild Talent from your primary element that you can currently use. I find that, and there's a large list, very much like spells, that a lot of the utility spells, because there's universal that go with all of the elements, there's a lot of universals that are just great. Things like Extend Range is universal. Focus Blast is universal. but there are multiples in the list that you'll use, so I don't find it hard to find something to pick. I do not see much of a problem with feats, which is why I wasn't worried about humans for this build, because I think they can get away with it. Unfortunately, unless you use 3PP, Spheres of Power, something like that, third party is where any of the real good items are. For a Kineticist, you're going to be using Celestial Armor probably for your medium armor. One of the best things you're going to get, if they will let you have it, is going to be an Overflow Rod. Overflow Rod is going to allow you to increase your elemental overflow by 3 levels higher than you currently are. And you can hit that max level of 7 burn at a much faster rate. It works very much like the key robes for a monk, but you're going to boost your con and then your dex before anything else. Everything else is going to be pretty much standard. The 3P books have got really some of the cool items that you would use if your GM will allow it. I will go over one quick thing when you start looking at all of the abilities, utility and otherwise. When you're looking at them, as you see, air, type, it gives you a list with them. Just like your composite and your normal blasts, your utility like Spark of Life and everything, they all have an element that they require you to have. If it's blast, it can only be used with certain elements. The same thing goes for any infusions. So you have to be specific and look closely whenever you're building your character, so that you don't pick something that's the wrong element or something that you can't do. So it takes a little more to build in a lot of cases, and usually people have to look over it a couple times, but it's worth it. Blast is fantastic. It does good damage. It's got some good utility to it, and I had a blast playing it. One of the most fun characters I've got to play in a long time, Kineticist, in our campaign. You got the time? Sit down, airbender, and have at it. See you next time. If you like this video, check out my others. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. If you have any tips or requests, drop them in the comments below. And until next time, may your crits be epic, your adventures legendary, and your gaming table filled with laughter.